Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the lab setup video for Wins in Windows Server 2003. In this video, we're going to take a look at our test network and just make sure that you have a good comfort level of exactly what is set up and what we're going to be running our labs on. Okay, so let's take a look at a diagram first. And this is very similar if you've watched labs 4 and 5, DNS and DHCP. It's really the exact same setup that we used in those particular labs. Okay, so if you look here, XP1, it just has the same IP address, 192.168.1.1 with a 24-bit mask and its default gateway, which is really unimportant for this lab, but it's pointing out here to a computer that we're running. This is actually a Windows 2000 server here with ISA server, it's a piece of software, installed on here, and this is acting as our firewall. Okay, we're also going to be using Server 1. Server 1 is named Server 1, that's the actual NetBIOS name, and its IP address is 192.168.1.100 with a 24-bit mask, 255.255.255.0. Okay, something that's not specified here. Server 1 is a domain controller, so this is something that has been installed already on top of this, and this is something you don't have to do. We already have this environment set up, so we're just going to leave it as is. It's a domain controller. It's also running DNS. Okay, that's running on this system. And we're going to take a look at the IP address information here in a second just to give you some more detail. The third computer is going to be Server 2. Okay, and Server 2 we'll be working with in the second lab when we install the second Win server. You see that it also has an IP address, 24-bit mask, 192.168.1.200. Okay, so a real simple 3-computer network. Primarily we'll be working with Server 1 here. This is where we're going to be talking about Wins. And then XP1 is going to be our Wins client who will connect out to Server 1 in order to get NetBIOS names. Or actually IP addresses resolved from NetBIOS names. Okay, let's go take a look at our actual diagram, just so that our network, just to make sure that you're comfortable with this. Now here we're sitting on XP1. This is the base system. This is where all the recordings actually start from. And what we've done here in XP1, you notice that we have this desktop background here with the man, staring off into the computer. So anytime you see this, you know that we're on the client computer, which is a Windows XP professional machine, and it's named XP1. If we take a look here and go to the properties of this, I'm just going to go to the computer name and then show you the actual computer name is XP1 as well. Okay, it is part of a domain. We join this to the domain controller over on Server 1, but we'll talk about that here momentarily. Okay, so XP1 is the name of the machine. The other thing to note, just so you're not confused, this name right here, XP1, and you see it also here, this normally does not say this. It'll say my computer, and what I've done is just simply gone down here and renamed it and named it XP1 for your convenience. Okay, so now we're sitting here on XP1 as I mentioned. We're going to form a remote desktop connection over to Server 1 and Server 2 here, but let's take a quick peek at the IP address on this system. You see that we have two network cards, okay, local area connection 2 and then just local area connection. This one's disabled, so we're not using that second network card. This one is connected though. If we right click and go to properties, you can take a look at our settings here. The IP address 192.168.1.1. We have a 24-bit mask 255.255.255.0. The default gateway is connecting us to the internet here in this local network, but this setting is not going to be important to you just in our discussions about Wins. The preferred DNS server right now is set to 192.168.1.100. Okay, and that's just our Server 1 machine. That's our domain controller and currently our DNS server. Okay, those settings will allow us to connect over to Server 1. Okay, in Server 1 we can either type in the IP address for or actually use the NetBIOS name. Okay, Server 1 is the name of the computer, and as you can see it connects us over here to Server 1. Now in Server 1 we're using a blue background just to make it easier to identify. We've renamed my computer and then put an icon on the desktop so you know that Server 1 is the system we're on. And this system is running Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition, and this is an evaluation copy. On this system, we're going to go to the network card properties. Here's the actual network card. And the IP settings are 192.168.1.100. It's the IP address, okay, subnet mask. Default gateway is the same as XP1, and then its preferred DNS server is actually itself. Okay, this is the only DNS server on the network, so it's pointing to itself for all DNS name resolutions. Other settings that you should be aware of. This machine has been turned into a domain controller. Okay, so we've come through here, and you can set this up really any way you want, but the defaults are really what you want to do here. Okay, so we've just gone to start run. We ran DC promo. We can't go through this again because it'll demote this machine. Okay, but you will see these steps in different labs, or if you're not familiar with them, we actually have the steps in the PDF lab book on CD as well. Okay, so we'll cancel this here, and the next thing we'll take a look at is just to show you, we do have Active Directory users and computers installed. And if we come back here to the properties of my computer again, you can see that this machine is named server1, and it's part of a domain named wbc.local. Can't change this information because this is a domain controller, so when I come down here we see that this is grayed out. Okay, and then our last thing that we have set up on these machines, the ability to connect over to them to show you what's going on, and that's done using remote desktop. You can see that I've got this option selected. What this does is allows us to do exactly what we're doing right now. From XP1, okay, this system, I'm able to form a remote desktop connection and then connect over to server 1 in order to manage it further. Okay, and you can set this up on a private network as well. It really simplifies the process of managing servers. So very straightforward. That's really all that we need to do on server 1. No other installations. Just make sure that your network settings are good, and you don't even have to make it a domain controller, but we did for simplicity in this lab. Our second machine that we'll be working with starting in lab 2 is going to be server 2. Okay, and server 2 is located at 192.168.1.200. We're going to connect over to it just using its NetBIOS name of server 2. Okay, we're sitting on server 2, and you're going to see the exact same type of settings. It's a server 2003 Enterprise Edition, evaluation copy. We're going to, I don't think I can do it from here, but let's check. Change this color background to black. Okay, let me do it. So I change this to black, and what this will do, just so we can easily identify that this is server 2, and of course we can look up in any of these other locations and it'll tell us as well. Checking its IP settings here, if we go up here and right-click My Network Places, then go to Properties, we see that this machine has very similar IP information as the other machines. It's 192.168.1.200 is the IP address of this computer. Subnet mask the same, default gateway the same, and the preferred DNS server is also the same. And that's really all that you need to do in this system. There's nothing else that needs to be done right now. We will be installing Wins on this machine and also DHCP, but that's not until later labs, and we'll cover that as well. Okay, so from XP1 now, we're sitting back here in this base system. I would just recommend that you make sure that you can connect over to these systems. And the best way to do that, just issue the ping command. Okay, so we're going to ping over to server 1, which is at 1.100. And we're also going to ping over to server 2, which is at 1.200. Okay, both of these machines are reachable. We have no problems there. You can also try pinging using a NetBIOS name. Okay, and a NetBIOS name, if you watch the concepts video, you'll remember a NetBIOS name. NetBIOS refers to the application program interface, and that's just kind of the old way of networking. It's how the networking program was written. Software developers use NetBIOS. That's just the system they used. Outside software developers, people who develop third-party software for the Microsoft operating system, they had this standard application program interface then that makes it much, much easier to write programs for the Windows operating systems. Okay, so NetBIOS is referring to that application program interface. A NetBIOS name is just a name we give a computer in order to more easily identify it on the network. Okay, computers though, they don't really care about NetBIOS names. They care about the actual IP address, like we see up here, 100 and 200. We can ping, however, the NetBIOS name if we wanted to. Like here, we're pinging server 1. Take a look at what it does. It figures out that server 1 actually has this IP address, so it pings this IP address. What it's done here using some sort of name resolution method, either DNS or NetBIOS broadcasts, okay, has figured out who server 1 is, what its IP address is, and then has filled that in and done the ping for us. And we can do the same thing for server 2. and you see that it's done the exact same thing. Took the name we gave it, changed it into an IP address, and then executed the ping command. Okay, so pretty straightforward setup, and we will cover any other changes, differences in the upcoming labs as needed. Okay, that wraps up the lab setup video. We'll see you back here real soon when we get started into Wins in Lab 1.